Hi YouTube, Roy Marco with Roy Marco's Garage coming to you. 51 Hudson Hornet. I got it up on jack stands. That's all I've done. Wheels are off the ground, so we can kind of work on everything here. Took things off the car, fuel tank, what was left of the exhaust system. This glass panel is one of the new windshields I just set in here because there was a wide open hole and I didn't want rain getting in, but it's not fully in. So I'm going to show you how easy it is to actually change windshields in this car. We're going to do a windshield on the other side, get all that done. That'll probably be the first job I do after I wash the car. I'm just going to go ahead and kind of take the pressure washer, wash out dirt. Inside the frame rail here is full of sand, stuff like that. So we want to wash all that out so that it just prevents future rust, even though it's kind of a beater. Still, it's a nice old 51. We want to kind of fix it up a little bit. Okay, so today is the 9th of the month, and I'm already behind. I wanted to know by the 16th whether I feel like I could actually get this car done, and I have to let the organizers know so somebody else can get in. If I don't feel like I'm going to make the challenge, I'm still going to build this car, get it done this summer so that it rolls around and drives what we can. So anyway, let's get to it. Okay, so here's the fuel tank that came out of the car. It's quite a big tank. It's in rough shape, and the smell and the dirt, and I'm not sure this tank will be usable. I actually ordered up a 55 Chevy fuel tank just to put it in that car. It looks very similar in the way it mounts, so I'm just hoping it'll go right in with no issues, and we don't have to worry about using that old junk. This is what was left of the exhaust system. It's none of it's usable. The muffler has a hole in it, a few holes. So I don't think any of this is going back in the car. I do have some old exhaust system if you want to follow me here. And of course, if you see the grass, this is where the car was sitting. I've been so busy, I got to get my yard done too. So anyway, this is the old exhaust pipes that came out of that 57 Chevy. They're terrible, but they're not rusty. So if I have to, I can cut sections out of this and do exhaust on the Hudson. So that'll save some money, of course. Everything's about saving money on this build. 57 Chevy was all about spending money, and this one is all about saving money. So my budget's $700, and the car was free, but it cost me $200 in fuel to pick it up. Between that and the parts car, so I'm gonna put a value of the car as $200 what I paid for the car, and I got all the brake parts, but that doesn't really count. It's about $600 in master cylinder, wheel cylinders, brake lines, hoses. But that's all safety equipment, so it doesn't really count towards the $700. So the engine was $150, so we're at $350. There's a couple pieces I want to buy that are new, just so it's reliable. The rest of it I'm going to have to budget the pieces together. And of course, it still has a cost. Basically, like the wheels and tires, for instance, they came off a '76 Chrysler Newport that I used to have. That car was beautiful. The guy wanted to put some 18-inch wheels on it. So part of the deal was I got the original wheels back, and they fit the car perfect. So the wheels, Auto Records charges, let's say $20 a wheel plus a tire, so I have to add that to the price. So I'm very close to, although tires might be safety, right? So to a point. So maybe I'm looking at $80 for the wheels and tires I have to add to the bill. I want to be transparent with this build. I want to show kind of everything that goes into it, and even though it might go above 700, I still want to do the challenge. I just think it'd be a fun car to do it with. These are the wheels here. These are the 15 by 7s that came off of the 76 Newport. These are quite a desirable steel wheel on Mopars right now. They fit this car really nice. The only difference is they use wheel bolts instead of studs and nuts. And there's a pin that kind of guides on for the bolts. I had to cut that pin off. I didn't want to drill any holes in these wheels. I do have a set of hubcaps here, but they're the dog dish hubcaps for police cars. I just think it would look a little odd on here, so I'm just going to leave it open. Ideally, if you come over here, this is a picture. Yeah, okay, so Steve, he does artwork, and he did my t-shirt, as you can see here. And we did the artwork for this car, so I'm hoping to have this fabulous Hudson Hornet painted on the side of the car. The YouTube will be a decal. If anybody does decals out there in the Edmonton area and wants to help me out with this, the Roy Marco I want to put up here on both sides, and then Roy Marco's garage I want to put on the hood here. So I need those done in decals. The rest of it I'll paint. So that's what I want the car to look like. Of course, these t-shirts will be available soon, but if I don't get the car painted that way. Anyway, we'll get them up. So, see if you like this. Is it high enough to clear, or do I gotta go higher? Right there. Watch your feet, Sandy. Yeah, it's on there. Let me get rid of that, whatever that is. Yeah. That's what, 2 bolts? Best fit in the car, and it's not bolted in or anything like that. It's just sitting in here. I do need to gain some more room here at the back of the valve cover, which will probably happen as the transmission gets picked up, because it has to come up a little bit. So I got the engine sitting in here. I have to have it sitting quite high. If you notice, I got about 4.5 inches between the oil pan and that cross member. And the reason I need so much height is because of the steering links. If you look in there, otherwise it'll hit the oil pan. So I can't come much more forward. If I do, I have to bring the engine up higher. So I'm trying to get it in there like that. Here's the center line. Engine's a little bit off center line, a little bit to the passenger side. I can make it right in the middle, but a little bit off to the passenger side might gain me some more room over on the steering side. I have an exhaust manifold here that has to go between the engine and the steering bar. This steering link, drag link it would be called, just moves forward and back, so it's not too bad. Got some room there. Alternator has room. So now what I have to do is come up with a way to have an engine mount off of here, and then weld an engine mount off of here, and have some sort of rubber isolator in between the two. And same with building a transmission cross member. The front here, these are the original engine mounts for the Hudson 6. It'd be nice to utilize these, but I have no way of really doing so. They're quite far away, and there's not much to bolt to the front of the engine to make it mount. So it's going to be side mounts, and of course the mount at the tail shaft. Let's go underneath and look. The tail shaft of the transmission housing is just sort of resting on this emergency brake assembly. I want to keep all of this in place because I'd like the emergency brake system to work. So I want to raise this tail shaft up a little bit. By doing so, it will move that valve cover away from the firewall. I also got to pick up some sort of mount here for the transmission rubber insulator. I may build my own metal mount to a 90-degree like piece of angle iron, just to use a standard GM mount, because I probably have one kicking around the shop, so it won't cost anything. Okay, that's that. So as you can see, there's the clearance underneath on the steering. First, I'm going to work on those front mounts and figure something out, and then go from there. Alright, a little more jostling around, and I think I'm happy with the engine location. As you can see there, it's not touching the firewall anymore, and I can still access the bolts to get the valve cover off. I still have good clearance on the steering. See if I can see that there. See, I still have good clearance on the steering to the oil pan. Okay, I also was able to take out one more 2x4 and just replace it with a 1x4. So that is now a total of 3 3/4 inches instead of 4.5. So that's brought it down a little bit. I have clearance for the steering. I have clearance enough to get the exhaust down through here. The engine is slightly off center, so there's center. The engine is just slightly over to the passenger side, but if you look, it's straight all the way, a little off center, the whole thing. And that's so that you can have room. And the original engine is slightly off center too. Okay. I got good clearance on the bell housing, and the dipstick tube is not hitting that factory transmission mount. So let's go underneath. I got the floor jack holding up the transmission, but I have sufficient room for the yoke on the drive shaft to clear the body, and the tail shaft is lined up with what appears to be where the middle of the transmission should be, kind of the middle of the peak of the hump here. So there's good tunnel room for the drive shaft, and then of course the rear end. This used to be a 2-piece drive shaft. There was an H thing that bolted up under here, which will not go back. If it has to go back for support, I can do that, but it's not going to have a steady bearing on it. And then this piece will have to be chopped out the bottom so that the drive shaft can clear and make a 1-piece run here. All right, well, there you have it. Engine's sitting in place exactly where I want. I'm happy with it. I wouldn't want to change a thing about it. Right now I feel like it's right where it should be. So now I got to worry about making mounts, and that's what I'm going to have to fabricate. What do I do for mounts? Well, what do I do for mounts? One of the things I thought about doing is using these GM factory mounts. I have these left over from the 57 build. They came with the engine mount kit, so they won't cost me anything, but I do have to put them probably as a used part cost, or like a junkyard part cost for an engine mount on the Challenge. So I got these mounts to go in. I'm going to use some plates I bought at a swap meet. I paid $2 or something. Energy suspension left over, so they're like a backing plate. Well, that's a perfect way to mount that mount. And then I just have to weld these plates onto an adapter that then fits the engine, so that these mounts will adapt and use them. The reason I'm using Chevy mounts, you can always buy them. They're readily available. If you go to like an AMC mount, they're just not available, even if I want them. So basically, even the transmission, it's kind of got a funny mount. I got an idea for that, and I'll show you that too. Okay, I cut myself some spacers here. So the Chevy motor mount, Chevy engine mount here, you can put that into there, so you can put your bolt through. But I'm going to run these on the lathe and machine them and make them so they fit that mount. Alright, so the original mount on this 6-cylinder engine goes like this on the side, and then there's a place for a stock AMC mount, and that would go down back. But I didn't want the engine mount so far back, so flipping these side to side was kind of an option. But anyway, I decided to go do this. So cut a plate, goes these 3 bolts. Then I had to make a spacer behind this one on the lathe, 1/2 inch thick, so that it tightens up against the block nice and flat. Then I'm going to use this motor mount plate down so it shares 1 bolt, and it gets welded to this plate. And then you have the engine mount go on, and then here's those machined spacers there. And that will then get welded off a bracket to the chassis, so the engine can be removed. You have an engine mount that's replaceable. Now these mounts are designed to kind of sit at this angle on a small block Chevy, and I'm kind of putting them vertical. So if they do come apart, there is a metal plate here that would stop it, so the engine wouldn't drop very far. But these mounts are prone to breaking, at least with any sort of horsepower. So I'm hoping it'll work for this application. If I have to, I could always upgrade to energy suspension mounts. But for now, for the challenge, I got money for that, so we're going to just use these stock ones. They are new, didn't cost me anything, they kind of came in the parts. Try them out. So the other side I got welded already, just to see, you can see how that's all going to be, and that's what I'm going to do on the other side. Make that mount up. I got to paint them, and I can bolt all this stuff together. But before I paint them, I got to make the mount come over to the frame on this side. I think I'm going to cut this mount off and utilize that back over here. So we'll see how that turns out. We have an issue where the AMC engine or transmission mount is got a flange on it this way, as where a Chevy normally just has a couple of bolts going up. The problem is getting this tranny mount. I didn't have one, and to buy one, well, they're unavailable. My supplier, Bumper to Bumper, doesn't have any, and there's none anywhere in Canada, and from any of the places he can pull from, and even Rock Auto didn't have any, so there's none. So of course I got GM mounts lying around. This is a tranny mount that I have lying around here, so I want to be able to make this tranny mount fit the transmission. So I'm going to take a piece of this angle iron here and mark it out, drill some holes. I measured, these are 3 inches apart, so makes it fairly easy anyway. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and make a bracket and see how that turns out. And I came up with this bracket here where you have 2 bolts that go up 2 holes, and 2 bolts will hold this bracket up here onto the transmission. So this might be a good tip for anybody else who has an AMC. If you're looking for a tranny mount, you can build this, and then this allows the tranny mount to fit. So here, let me just bolt this up and I'll show you. The tranny mount is now in place here. It's just loose. It's got the wrong kind of bolts in there. They need to be 7/16 instead of 3/8. Anyhow, now I just got to come up with a way to put a cross member here. I connect it to that side of the frame and this side of the frame. And just like that 55 Chevy, I cut a couple pieces off of that angle iron or angle metal there. And I think I'm going to weld one to this side and one on this side just here, so it's out of the way of the master cylinder. And then have some holes here, and then I can run like 1x2 tubing across and bolt it all together, and that should do it. Sort of working on it here 2 full days. We got the engine mounts up front. I still have to finish doing a little bit of welding. I got to pull this mount out and then just paint it. So anyway, the engine's now supported completely 100% by itself. If I shake it, it's got good stability there. This is the engine mount that goes to the chassis of the vehicle, and there's one on each side. And what I have done here is actually remove them from the frame just to clean this up so there's a little more room. They don't need to be there. Chances of putting the original engine in this car again is very slim to none. So on this side, I utilized the long mount and actually cut it narrower and put it in to hold this side, and then it allowed me to weld this to the frame, make it nice and sturdy because it sticks out so far. I even just gave it a little notch here so there's some clearance for the steering. And that's the driver's side mount. Also gives me room for the exhaust here. Passenger side mount was much simpler, but I had enough left over what I cut off just to make a little mount here on the end. I got this tranny mount made with C-channel that goes from one side to the other. And all I did here, this is that Chevy mount. What I did was I flipped this forward instead of behind. You saw me make that bracket there. And then these are just little angle iron pieces or pieces of metal or bent, welded to the frame and then bolted down to this member that's removable. And then those are the 2 bolts for the Chevy mount, common Chevy mount. No big deal. Can't get a AMC transmission mount, so now it's a Chevy mount in there. There's this bar here was all bent, which didn't give clearance for the U-joint here for this emergency brake assembly. So that's now all clear, and we'll now be able to fit a drive shaft in there. And the emergency brake still has to be hooked up from the inside. Just kind of going through and cleaning stuff up here. So engine's installed. There's a cross member that bolts in here on the frame. I think I'm going to bolt it back in. It clears just to keep some strength here in the body. This is all unibody construction with basically a subframe that's welded into the car. I've never been underneath the Hudson. What's really cool about this is like all the floor pans, I mean, they're surface rusted, but they're solid. There's no rust holes anywhere. This is all original sheet metal in the floor of this automobile. I did have to cut out here. I was measuring up the drive shaft, which I'll talk about in a minute, and I ended up cutting this. There's a bar that goes here, and the drive shaft would go through here because it's a two-piece. There's some bolt holes here and some bolt holes here, which bolt in an H member, which I'll show you on the ground. So here's the drive shaft that comes out of an AMC Rambler. And the cool thing about it is the U-joint end and measurement is the same as the Hudson. So this U-joint actually fits right into the differential on the car. This is the length of the AMC drive shaft, and here's the length of the Hudson drive shaft, and I need a drive shaft somewhere that's a little longer than that one, so I'd have to lengthen this shaft. Now I wanted to cut this drive shaft and then cut one end off here and then slide one tube in the other. This tube would be much smaller than this one, and I'd have to come up with an intermediate tube. And here's that H member that goes underneath there that we talked about. Bolts up under the car, and that holds the steady bearing here. So this drive shaft would then go like that. There's a slip in here for length. That's the original setup there. Rebuilding this setup, I could shorten this drive shaft, put this in, but rebuilding this and getting pieces, the steady bearing is a little crunchy. Getting all this done would just cost way more money than what the Challenger allowed me. Of course, I ended up having to spend money anyway getting a drive shaft made. Thanks to Excel Driveline, they came through, did up a drive shaft for me, and here it is over here. There's the Excel Driveline drive shaft. This is officially the nicest piece on the car, and also the nicest drive shaft I own on any vehicle I have, and it's going in the beater. Now you might say, hey Roy, this is a beater challenge. What are you putting a new drive shaft in for? You could have cut one and made one. And you're probably right. I have the welding skills. I feel confident in that. The problem is, I got to drive this car 5.5 hours from my home to the challenge. Then the challenge is a couple of days, no big deal. And then I got to drive the car home, and it's a long ways away, and it's highway. It's all 100 kilometers an hour stuff. Yeah, having an unbalanced drive shaft would just tear things to pieces. I probably wouldn't even make it to the challenge. Wouldn't be that much fun. So I'm going to take a hit. I'm going to take a hit on this for points and everything, but it's just one piece of the puzzle. I just, you know, if I could put used U-joints in it, and yeah, well, whatever, but it's just a piece of puzzle I have to do. So let's see if it fits in the car. Alright. Cell drive line. Okay, so I'm just putting on the strap bolts. I thought I had a good used set that I was going to use because I didn't want to buy new ones. But as it turns out, I don't. So I'll scratch another $10 towards the build. Drive shaft installed, transmission down to the rear end. So when I measured the length of this drive shaft, the rear end was jacked all the way up, and it had about 3/4 of an inch slip, and it's dropped down to about 1/2 inch with the rear end drooped. I think it comes forward when it comes down with the way the leaf springs are, so it will definitely be at a good length here. Thanks to Excel Driveline for putting that drive shaft together for me. It still costs money, but they did a wonderful job. Things like bumper brackets found in the C can there, getting them bolted on. And sway bar got bolted on. It's got the old original bushings on here, which are probably worn out. The stabilizer links, of course, those bolts, you know what they're like. Now those stabilizer bushing, stabilizer kits, I did not go and buy. I actually had those in my toolbox since about 2006 from an S10 a while back. So those are Chevy S10 ones. Why would I put red neoprene stabilizer links on this build? But looks like I'm just spending all the money. Alright, here's the one old shock that I had. I know what you're thinking. There's tons of miles left on this shock, and I bet you there is. I could probably get another 100,000 out of this, but you know, I'd have to rethread the ends. They're kind of all buggered from being cut out of there at one time. Also, it's an interesting thing about this car, the shock mounts. I got to show you that. Shock comes through the lower control arm, and then there's this intermediate plate that goes here, and then you push it up and you turn it, oh sorry, this way. You push it up and you turn it 90 degrees, and then it bolts into the lower part of the control arm here and mounts that shock to the control arm. Well, I don't have both of these plates, so I'm going to manufacture one out of this piece of flat bar. So I'm going to do that. And these old shocks, or these new shocks I should say, are a little bit longer. They cannot get this shock anymore. They tried. The part number they came up with was like international truck with the length and everything. So anyway, these are early 50s Ford shocks. So if you want the part number, if you're doing a Hudson, these are 5751s in Monroe. So if you got an old Hudson and you're looking for front shocks, this might do it for you. That's one thing about this build. There's not a lot of information about Hudson Hornets and Hudsons in general. So I want to be able to go through and show how these cars go together, other than it's not all original, because this is an AMC engine. It's a 199 cubic inch. It's still in the family, although I'd rather put a Chevy in for reliability. These basically became the 4 liters that are in the Jeeps, but nothing other than the cylinder head up fits from a 4-liter Jeep. And if you're a Jeep person, you'd know that the starter's on this side. So if anything happens to the starter on this car or the transmission, this engine, I mean, it's useless. I'm sure I might be able to get a starter, but who knows? It's totally different than most of that series of engines. So anyway, let's see if it works. Now I'm kind of excited. I got the drive shaft in. Also, one of the things that I found out was this is the stock shifter linkage from the Hudson, and it, without any modification, it actually fits onto the automatic transmission of the car. So that was exciting to be able to not have to really fabricate anything there. Now it doesn't work the smoothest because it's not exactly at the right angle and stuff, but it's a beater challenge, so I can't get fussy. That's the shifter linkage. It's done. So we need to start this thing up and see what happens. Okay, so now that I got the engine in and mounted, I got a little makeshift fuel bottle there, and let's see if it runs. This on what did run before, so it should easily run now. Oh, perfect. There we go. Can't run it long, there's no coolant. So let's see if it has reverse. Hey, the wheels turn. Sweet. Alright. Alright, well there you have it. Engine's in, fire's up, tranny's in, drive shaft's in. We got to do the rear end oil and brakes and all that kind of stuff coming up next week. Get the alternator bracket built, things like that. Some fabricating radiator. Anyway, hopefully in another week I'll have this thing pretty much ready to run. So anyway, if you like these videos, please subscribe. Hit that like button, ring that bell for notifications. Remember, community not competition. Thanks for watching. Have yourself a great day. Nice sneeze here.
Is that going to fit through that hole?
I did when it came in here.
You have to hammer it the hole over there.
There you go.
So, fabricating.
Hey bud, how's it going? You having a good time? You gonna film Daddy on his YouTube channel? Oh.
The beetles coming in here? Or what? Beetles going on my trailer?
No, he's just taking it out. Because
The beetle?
the beetle is going to someone else. We're moving this because he's going to start working on it.
Oh, good.
For the Great Beater Challenge.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
So this is the next project, but now that the 57's almost done, we're off and running on the Hudson.
No, I started this morning, like,
10.
but then, you know, we went and did a couple of things, picked up some hardware. So I've got about probably 6 hours in total. And then of course there's thinking time, but that I sleep and dream about it, so that's
So you're
20 hours there. I've built this car 20 times over in my sleep and thinking about it, like in my mind.
yeah.
And of course, now that it's coming time to actually put it together, things are not fitting exactly what I imagined. So you have to go back and rethink it through, but this is the thing, I don't know Hudson's that well in a sense, and I don't know AMC engines that well. I mean, so you know, Chevy small blocks, a different story. So it's all just, you kind of learn as you go and try, and it's problem solving. You got to problem solve as you go. So now that I'm done sounding like Bad Chad, I'm gonna get back to putting stuff together.
Why you gotta move the fat guy all the time?